The emergency meeting room buzzed with nervous energy as hundreds of alien beings filled the massive chamber. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered at the Galactic Medical Council headquarters, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic sounds. Some floated in special atmosphere tanks, others stood on legs that looked like crystal spears, and a few glowed with their own inner light. At the center of it all, Council Leader Zethkar raised one of his 6 arms to call for silence. His body looked like a walking diamond, each facet catching and reflecting the chamber's soft blue light. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the room like distant thunder. "Fellow beings of the medical community," Zethkar began, his words translated instantly into hundreds of languages. "We face a crisis unlike any in our recorded history. The mining colony on Kepler 442b is dying." A wave of concerned murmurs swept through the chamber. Kepler 442b was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most dangerous worlds where civilized beings dared to work. The mining operation there extracted rare crystals that powered faster-than-light travel, making it essential to galactic commerce, despite its deadly environment. "The Void Plague has infected 17 different species," Zethkar continued. 3 medical teams have attempted treatment. 2 barely escaped with their lives. The 3rd team—" He paused, his crystalline features darkening. "The 3rd team did not return. Dr. Vexinali, a gas-based being whose thoughts appeared as shifting colors in her containment suit, spoke up. Council Leader, surely our best nanomedical technology can handle this plague. We have quantum scanners that can identify any pathogen." "That is what we believed," Zethkar replied grimly. "But this plague adapts faster than our technology can counter it. Every treatment we develop becomes useless within hours. The plague learns from our attempts and grows stronger." The chamber erupted in worried conversations. Species that had conquered diseases for millennia were facing something that seemed impossible to cure. Some representatives suggested abandoning the colony entirely, but the mining operation was too valuable to lose. "There is one option remaining," Zethkar announced, causing the room to fall silent again. "One that goes against everything we consider medically sound." An elderly Aquarian delegate, her blue skin rippling with concern, spoke through her translation device. "What option could possibly remain, Council Leader?" Zethkar's faceted head turned slowly across the assembly. "We need a Class 12 Deathworlder, the ROM." Silence that followed was absolute. Class 12 worlds were the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. The classification meant a world so hostile that only the most resilient species could possibly evolve there. Most civilized beings considered such worlds to be uninhabitable nightmares. "You cannot be serious." Dr. Vexnali's colors flashed bright red with shock. "Class 12. Deathworlders are barely civilized. Their medical practices are primitive at best." "Primitive, perhaps," Zethkar acknowledged. "But there is only one known Class 12 world that has produced medical practitioners capable of working in impossible conditions. Earth." Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he finished stitching up a young soldier's wounds. The field hospital in Somalia was nothing more than reinforced tents and basic equipment. But Jake had been working here for 3 months, treating everything from gunshot wounds to tropical diseases. At 35, Jake had already spent more time in dangerous places than most people could imagine. He had fought Ebola outbreaks in West Africa, performed surgery during earthquakes in Nepal, and treated plague victims in Madagascar. His colleagues often joked that he was attracted to impossible situations, but Jake saw it differently. He went where people needed help, regardless of the danger. The communication device on his makeshift desk beeped with an incoming priority message. Jake glanced at the screen, expecting another emergency from one of the aid organizations he worked with. Instead, he saw something that made him stop mid-motion. The message header read, "Galactic Medical Council, Emergency Consultation Request." Jake stared at the screen for a long moment, then laughed out loud. Someone was playing an elaborate prank on him. Aliens contacting him for medical help? It was absurd. But as he read the message, his laughter faded. The technical details were too complex and consistent to be a joke. The medical terminology was accurate, and the biological data described species he had never heard of, but that seemed scientifically plausible. The message explained the situation on Kepler 442b in simple terms. A deadly plague was killing colonists from multiple alien species. Advanced medical technology had failed completely. They needed someone who could work in impossible conditions with primitive equipment and succeed where high-tech medicine had failed. Dr. Morrison, the message concluded, your reputation for working successfully in hostile environments has reached our attention. Earth humans are classified as Class 12 Deathworlders, capable of surviving and functioning in conditions that would kill most galactic species. We need someone who can handle the impossible. Will you accept this assignment? Jake read the message 3 times, then walked outside the medical tent. The hot African sun beat down on his shoulders as he looked up at the afternoon sky. Somewhere up there, if this message was real, alien beings were dying from a plague that their advanced medicine could not cure. His satellite phone rang. The voice on the other end spoke perfect English with just a slight accent that Jake could not identify. Dr. Morrison, this is Captain Lisa Park of the transport vessel New Horizons. I am human, like you, and I have been sent to retrieve you if you accept the Medical Council's assignment. This is real? Jake asked, still staring at the sky. Very real, Doctor. I have been working in galactic space for 7 years. There are more humans out there than you might think, but very few with your medical experience. The aliens need someone who can work miracles with basic tools. Jake thought about the patients he was treating, the lives he was saving with nothing, more than basic surgical instruments and antibiotics that were decades old by galactic standards. If aliens with advanced technology could not handle this plague, maybe they needed someone who was used to working with less. When do we leave? Jake asked. My ship will be at the coordinates I am sending you in 6 hours. Pack light, Doctor. Where we are going, Earth equipment might be the most advanced technology that actually works. As Jake packed his basic medical supplies, he could not help but smile. He had spent his career going to places where others feared to tread, treating diseases that others considered hopeless. Now, apparently, he was about to do the same thing on an alien world. Just another Tuesday for a human doctor, he thought as he closed his medical bag. The transport ship shuddered violently as it entered Kepler 442b's atmosphere. Jake gripped his seat harness tighter as Captain Lisa Park fought to keep the vessel steady. Through the small porthole beside him, he could see orange clouds swirling, with electrical storms that lit up the sky like angry fireworks. Welcome to hell, Doc, Lisa called out over the roar of the engines. This planet tries to kill everything that lands on it. Jake watched the landscape below grow larger as they descended. The surface looked like a nightmare painted in shades of red and orange. Massive storms swept across barren plains while geysers of toxic gas erupted from cracks in the ground. The gravity indicator on the ship's display showed nearly twice Earth's normal pull. How do people even survive down there? Jake asked, feeling the increased weight pressing him deeper into his seat. Very carefully, Lisa replied, adjusting the ship's shields as acidic rain began pelting the hull. The mining colony is built underground in natural cave systems. The colonists rarely come to the surface, and when they do, they wear full protective suits. The ship touched down with a bone-jarring thud at what Lisa called a landing pad, though it looked more like a cleared patch of rocky ground surrounded by towering metal barriers. Warning lights flashed red around the perimeter, and Jake could see automated defense systems tracking their ship's movement. Stay close to me and keep your breathing mask on, Lisa instructed as she powered down the engines. The air here will burn your lungs in minutes without protection. They stepped out into a world that assaulted Jake's senses immediately. Even through his protective suit, he could hear the constant howling of wind carrying particles that rattled against his faceplate like hail. The orange sky crackled with lightning that seemed to move sideways instead of down to the ground. A figure in a bulky environmental suit approached them, moving with the careful steps of someone fighting heavy gravity. When the figure spoke, Jake recognized the voice immediately as human. Dr. Morrison? I'm Commander Alex Stone. Thank God you're here. Stone led them across the landing area toward what looked like a massive metal door built into the side of a cliff. As they walked, Jake noticed scorch marks on the rocks around them and realized they were from lightning strikes. This planet was literally trying to electrocute anything that moved on its surface. "How long have you been stationed here?" Jake asked as they approached the entrance. 3 years, Stone replied. "It takes that long to get used to working in this environment. Most species can't handle more than a few hours on the surface, even in protective gear." The heavy doors slid open, revealing an airlock chamber large enough to fit a small building. As they went through the decontamination process, Stone briefed Jake on the situation inside the colony. "We've got 17 different species down here, and the plague is spreading faster every day. We've lost over 200 colonists already, and the survivors are scared. Some species are talking about breaking quarantine and trying to leave." "What about medical facilities?" Jake asked as they entered the colony proper. The underground complex was larger than Jake had expected. Tunnels carved from living rock stretched in every direction, lit by soft blue lights that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The air smelled of recycled atmosphere and something else Jake could not identify. "Our main medical center is this way," Stone said, leading them down a wide corridor. "Dr. Nina Rodriguez has been in charge since the plague started. She's been working around the clock for weeks." They passed groups of alien beings, unlike anything Jake had seen in science fiction movies. Some looked like walking trees with bark-like skin. Others resembled giant insects with multiple arms, and a few seemed to be made of living metal that shifted and flowed as they moved. All of them looked sick. The medical center was a chaos of activity and desperation. Dr. Nina Rodriguez stood in the center of it all, her dark hair pulled back and her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She was simultaneously directing treatment for 3 different patients while consulting readouts from alien medical equipment that beeped and flashed with urgent warnings. "Nina, this is Dr. Jake Morrison," Stone announced. Nina looked up from a patient whose skin appeared to be made of translucent crystal, now clouded with dark veins spreading like ink through water. Her relief was visible even through her fatigue. "Doctor Morrison, I've read your files. Ebola, plague, surgical procedures during natural disasters." She gestured around the medical bay. "I hope you're ready for something completely different." Jake surveyed the scene before him. In one corner, a being that looked like it was made of flowing liquid was contained in a special tank, but Jake could see dark spots spreading through its form. Nearby, several insect-like creatures lay motionless on specially designed beds, their usually bright carapaces now dull and cracked. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Jake asked, pulling on surgical gloves. "That's the problem," Nina replied, leading him to a microscope station. "Look at this." Jake peered through the eyepiece and saw something that made his medical training struggle to make sense of what he was observing. The plague organisms did not look like any bacteria or virus he had ever studied. They seemed to be constantly changing shape, adapting even as he watched. "It's not just one disease," Nina explained. "It's like a whole ecosystem of pathogens working together. Every time we develop a treatment, the plague adapts to counter it. The alien medical technology is too specialized. It targets specific aspects of the disease, but that just teaches the plague how to avoid those treatments." Jake straightened up from the microscope, processing what he had learned. Around him, alien medical equipment hummed and beeped with sophisticated diagnostics that would have been science fiction on Earth just days ago. Yet all of this advanced technology was failing against a plague that seemed to learn from every attempt to cure it. "Show me the treatment protocols you've tried," Jake said. For the next hour, Nina walked him through everything they had attempted. Quantum nanomedicine that could target individual cells, energy-based treatments that could restructure molecular bonds, and biological warfare techniques that could reprogram genetic material. All of it had failed. "The alien doctors keep trying to outsmart the plague," Nina explained. "They design more complex treatments, and the plague just becomes more complex in response." Jake nodded slowly. He had seen something similar during his work with antibiotic-resistant bacteria, but never on this scale. The alien approach was like fighting fire with fire, when sometimes what you needed was water. "What about basic approaches?" he asked. "Simple chemical treatments, physical interventions?" Nina looked puzzled. You mean primitive methods? The alien doctors tried a few early treatments like that, but they considered them too crude to be effective. Jake walked over to his medical bag and pulled out what looked like ancient equipment compared to the alien technology surrounding them. A basic microscope, simple chemical test kits, and bottles of medications that Earth doctors had been using for decades. Sometimes crude is exactly what you need, he said, setting up his equipment on a nearby table. If this plague learns from complex attacks, maybe it won't know how to handle simple ones. As Jake began his examination using tools that the aliens probably considered museum pieces, he could feel curious eyes watching him from around the medical bay. Some of the alien medical staff had gathered to observe the primitive human doctor at work. What they could not understand was that Jake was not just using old technology. He was using an approach that had evolved on a world where survival meant adapting faster than the threats trying to kill you. Earth had taught humanity to fight dirty, to use whatever worked, and to never assume that complex was better than simple. The plague was about to meet a Deathworlder doctor who had learned medicine in places where failure meant death, and success meant using whatever tools were available to save lives. Jake rolled up his sleeves and got to work. Jake spent the first 3 hours doing something that horrified every alien medical professional in the facility. He deliberately infected tissue samples with the void plague. Dr. Morrison, what are you doing? Dr. Kextai, a tall, insect-like being with 4 arms, clicked nervously as he watched Jake work. You are giving the plague more material to adapt with. That's exactly what I'm doing, Jake replied calmly, adjusting his basic microscope to observe the infected samples. I want to see how it adapts. Nina stood beside him, watching the simple equipment work in ways that the sophisticated alien scanners had failed to do. Jake, the alien medical protocol specifically forbid deliberate infection. They consider it too dangerous. On Earth, we call it controlled exposure, Jake explained, making notes on an old-fashioned paper pad. If you want to understand an enemy, you have to watch how it fights. Through his microscope, Jake observed something that made him pause. The plague organisms were not just random parasites. They worked together like a military unit, with different types handling different tasks. Some attacked the host's immune system. Others broke down cellular walls, and still others seemed to coordinate the whole attack. Nina, look at this, Jake said, stepping back from the microscope. The plague is not one disease. It's like a whole army of diseases working together. Nina peered through the eyepiece and gasped. They're coordinating their attacks, that's why the alien treatments failed. They were trying to kill individual soldiers instead of fighting the whole army. Dr. Kexatai's compound eyes focused on the human equipment, with what Jake was learning to recognize as confusion. Your primitive microscope shows this, but our quantum scanners did not? Your scanners are too smart, Jake replied. They focus on individual organisms and miss the big picture. Sometimes you need to step back and see the forest instead of the trees. Over the next several hours, Jake continued his unconventional research. He infected different types of tissue samples, mixed various Earth-based chemicals with the plague, and even tried exposing the organisms to different temperatures and pressures. Each experiment taught him more about how the plague system worked. The alien medical staff gathered around his work area, watching with a mixture of fascination and horror as Jake used methods they considered dangerously primitive. Some whispered among themselves in their native languages, but the universal translators picked up words like reckless and unscientific. Dr. Morrison, Dr. Vexnali approached him, her gas form swirling with colors that indicated concern. Your methods appear to have no structure or plan. How can you cure a disease without following proper medical protocols? Jake looked up from his notes, where he had been sketching diagrams of the plague's behavior patterns. Dr. Vexnali, what do you do when you encounter a new disease? We scan it with quantum analyzers, determine its genetic structure, and design targeted nano-treatments to eliminate specific weaknesses, she replied, her colors shifting to indicate pride in their advanced methods. And when that doesn't work? We improve the scanning resolution and design more precise treatments. Jake nodded. That's your problem. You're playing chess with an opponent that's playing poker. The plague doesn't follow your rules. Nina had been watching Jake work for hours, and she was beginning to understand his approach. "You're not trying to outsmart the plague. You're trying to confuse it." "Exactly." Jake smiled, pulling out several bottles of basic Earth medications from his bag. "The plague has learned to counter sophisticated attacks, but it has never encountered aspirin, penicillin, or simple saline solutions." Dr. Kexthai's antennae twitched with confusion. "Those substances are thousands of years old by galactic medical standards. How could such primitive treatments be effective?" "Because sometimes the old ways work," Jake replied, beginning to mix a solution that would have looked familiar to any Earth doctor from the past century. "The plague expects complex molecular attacks. It doesn't know what to do with simple chemistry." Jake's first test was on a tissue sample from Vextai, the young crystalline being who was closest to death. Her light organs had almost completely dimmed, and the dark veins of plague infection covered most of her translucent body. Using a basic syringe that looked ancient compared to the alien injection systems, Jake introduced his simple chemical mixture directly into the infected tissue sample. The alien medical staff watched their monitoring equipment with skeptical attention. At first, nothing happened. The plague continued its attack on the crystalline tissue, and the alien doctors began to whisper that the humans' primitive approach had failed like all the others. Then something unexpected occurred. The plague organisms began to slow down. Not die, not retreat, but simply slow down as if they were confused. "It's working," Nina breathed, watching the readouts on both human and alien equipment. "The plague doesn't know how to adapt to such simple treatments." Dr. Vex Nali's color shifted to bright yellow, indicating shock. "Impossible. Such basic chemistry cannot be effective against an advanced biological system." "That's the point," Jake explained, preparing a larger batch of his mixture. "The plague learned to fight advanced medicine. It never learned to fight old-fashioned medicine." Over the next few hours, Jake developed what he called a confusion protocol. Instead of using one sophisticated treatment, he used multiple simple treatments at the same time. Basic antibiotics attacked bacterial components, simple antiviral compounds targeted viral elements, and old-fashioned immune boosters helped the patient's natural defenses. The key was timing. Jake had to administer different treatments at precise intervals, overwhelming the plague's ability to adapt to multiple simple attacks simultaneously. It was like fighting a master swordsman by throwing rocks from 6 directions at once. Tom, Casey, the colony's chief engineer, watched Jake work with growing amazement. "Doc, you're not using any of the automated systems. How do you know when to give each treatment?" "Experience," Jake replied, checking the pulse of an aquatic patient whose biosuit had been failing for days. "You learn to read the signs. When the patient's color changes, when their breathing shifts, when their temperature fluctuates. Machines can't see what a trained eye can see." Nina began to understand why the aliens needed a human doctor. Their medicine was based on precise measurements and automated responses. Jake's approach required constant human judgment, the ability to make split-second decisions based on observation and intuition. "This is why they called it a Deathworlder job," Nina realized aloud. "Not because of the physical danger, but because it requires the kind of adaptive thinking that comes from evolving on a world that constantly tries to kill you." Jake nodded as he prepared treatments for 3 more patients simultaneously. "Earth taught us to improvise, to use whatever works, and to never assume that complex is better than simple. Sometimes the best solution is the one nobody expects." The alien medical staff watched in amazement as Jake worked without advanced scanners, automated injection systems, or quantum analyzers. He used his eyes, his hands, and medical knowledge that was considered primitive by galactic standards, but it was working. For the first time since the plague outbreak began, patients were showing signs of improvement. The key was not to defeat the plague with superior technology, but to confuse it with approaches it had never encountered. As Jake treated his 10th patient of the day, using nothing more sophisticated than basic chemistry and careful observation, he realized that Earth's harsh conditions had given humanity something the galaxy desperately needed, not just the ability to survive in impossible places, but the ability to solve impossible problems with simple solutions. The plague had met its match, not in advanced alien technology, but in the adaptability of a species that had learned to survive by thinking differently than everyone else. Dr. Kexthai approached Jake as he finished treating another patient. "Dr. Morrison, I owe you an apology. Your methods may appear primitive, but they are proving more effective than our most advanced treatments." Jake smiled, wiping sweat from his forehead with an old-fashioned cloth towel. "Sometimes primitive is exactly what you need. The question is, are you ready to learn some very old-fashioned medicine?" As word of Jake's success spread through the HFY colony, more alien medical professionals gathered to observe the human doctor who was achieving the impossible with tools their ancestors might have used millennia ago. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the best medicine was the simplest medicine, applied by someone who had learned to heal in places where failure was not an option. The first real success came on Jake's 4th day at the colony. Vextai, the young crystalline being who had been closest to death, began to glow again. Her inner light started as a faint flicker deep within her translucent body, then gradually grew brighter as Jake's simple treatments continued to confuse the plague. "By the ancient crystals," her father Mortai whispered, his own crystalline form shimmering with emotion. "She lives. The human medicine has brought back her light." Word of Vextai's recovery spread through the colony like wildfire. Beings who had been preparing for death suddenly had hope again. The medical bay filled with alien colonists who wanted to see the human doctor who was achieving the impossible with primitive tools. But Jake's success brought new problems that no one had expected. The treatment protocol required constant human supervision. Every few hours, Jake had to examine each patient personally, make decisions about dosage adjustments, and determine when to switch between different simple medicines. "The timing is everything," Jake explained to Nina as they worked through their 3rd straight day without sleep. "The plague adapts to each treatment, so we have to stay one step ahead by changing approaches before it figures out what we're doing." Nina watched Jake examine a tree-like being whose bark had been turning black with plague infection. Jake looked at the patient's leaves, felt the texture of the bark, and even smelled the sap that oozed from infected areas. No alien scanner could provide the kind of information that Jake gathered through direct observation. "How do you know when to change treatments?" Nina asked, genuinely curious about methods that seemed to work by instinct rather than measurement. "Experience," Jake replied, adjusting the chemical mixture for the tree being's next dose. "You learn to read the signs that machines can't detect. This patient's sap smells different today than yesterday. That tells me the plague is adapting to the antibiotic, so we switched to the antiviral compound." Dr. Kexthai had been watching Jake work for hours, taking notes with 2 of his 4 hands while his compound eyes tracked every movement. "Dr. Morrison, your treatment requires decisions that no automated system could make. How can we scale this approach to treat larger numbers of patients?" Jake paused in his work, realizing the magnitude of the problem they faced. His methods were working, but they required the kind of intuitive medical knowledge that took years to develop. You could not program a computer to notice that a patient's breathing sounded slightly different, or that their skin color had changed in a way that indicated the plague was shifting its attack strategy. "You need more human doctors," Jake said simply. "Or you need to learn to practice medicine the way humans do." This statement caused a stir among the alien medical professionals. Dr. Vexnali's colors shifted to deep purple, indicating serious concern. "Dr. Morrison, are you suggesting that our medical practices are inadequate?" "Not inadequate," Jake replied carefully. "Just different. Your medicine is based on precise measurements and predictable responses. Human medicine includes intuition, pattern recognition, and the ability to make decisions with incomplete information." Commander Stone appeared at the medical bay entrance, his face showing both relief and worry. "Dr. Morrison, I've been in contact with the Galactic Medical Council. They're amazed by your success, but they're also asking questions about your methods." "What kind of questions?" Nina asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Some council members are concerned about the safety of primitive medical practices. They want to know if human medicine meets galactic safety standards." Jake continued working on his current patient while he spoke. "Commander, ask them this. What's More dangerous, trying new approaches that work, or sticking with old approaches that fail. Over the next few days, more patients began to recover. The insect-like beings regained their bright carapace colors, the liquid form entities stopped dispersing, and the aquatic species were able to repair their biosuits as their immune systems recovered. But each success required Jake's personal attention. He developed individual treatment plans for each species, adjusting his simple medicines to work with completely different biological systems. The workload was exhausting, and Jake realized he was reaching his limits. "I need help," he admitted to Nina as they took a brief break after treating their 15th patient of the day. "I can't maintain this pace much longer, and there are still dozens of patients who need treatment." Nina had been thinking about the same problem. "What if I learned your methods? I've been watching you work for days. I'm starting to understand how you read the signs." Jake looked at her with surprise. "You want to learn Deathworlder medicine?" "I want to learn medicine that works," Nina replied firmly. "Show me how to see what you see." Jake's first lesson in teaching human medical intuition to another doctor began with something simple: observing a patient's breathing patterns. He taught Nina to listen, not just to the sound of breathing, but to the rhythm, the depth, and the subtle changes that indicated how the body was responding to treatment. "Machines can measure respiratory rate," Jake explained, "but they can't hear the difference between breathing that's improving and breathing that's getting worse in the same subtle way. That difference tells you whether to continue the current treatment or switch to something else." Tom Casey, the engineer, had been modifying the medical equipment to work better with Jake's approach. Instead of fully automated systems, he created hybrid devices that provided information to human doctors rather than making decisions for them. "Doc, I've rigged the monitors to show trends instead of just current readings," Tom explained, pointing to modified displays. "This way you can see patterns that might not be obvious from single measurements." As Nina began to successfully treat patients using Jake's methods, other human staff members asked to learn as well. The colony's small human population became an impromptu medical school, with Jake teaching them to practice medicine in ways that combined human intuition with basic technology. The alien medical staff watched this process with fascination and growing concern. Some were genuinely interested in learning new approaches, while others worried about the implications of abandoning their established methods. Dr. Kexatai approached Jake during one of his teaching sessions. "Dr. Morrison, I have studied medicine for 47 years using the most advanced techniques in the galaxy. Are you suggesting that I should abandon everything I have learned?" "Not abandon," Jake replied. "Combine. Your knowledge of alien physiology is far beyond anything I could learn in a lifetime. But you could learn to observe patients the way humans do, to make decisions based on patterns rather than just measurements." The real test came when Jake had to make a difficult decision about the colony's evacuation schedule. The plague was under control, but many patients still needed constant monitoring. The evacuation ships were scheduled to arrive in 3 days, but Jake's patients would not be stable enough to travel for at least a week. Commander Stone called an emergency meeting with all department heads. "Dr. Morrison, the Galactic Medical Council is pressuring us to evacuate on schedule. They're concerned about the risks of staying on this planet longer than necessary." Jake looked around the room at the faces of people who had become his colleagues and friends. Nina had successfully treated 6 patients using his methods. Tom had modified equipment that now worked better than the original alien technology. The human staff had learned to read signs and make decisions that saved lives. "What happens to the patients who aren't ready to travel?" Jake asked. "The council suggests transferring them to ships with advanced medical facilities," Stone replied. "They believe alien medical technology can maintain the patients during transport." Jake shook his head. "The plague is still in their systems, it's just confused by our treatments. If you switch back to advanced alien medicine, the plague will adapt again. These patients need human medical supervision until they're completely cured." The room fell silent as everyone realized what Jake was saying. The choice was between following the evacuation schedule and potentially losing patients, or staying on a deadly planet to continue treatments that required constant human presence. Nina spoke up first. "I'll stay with Dr. Morrison. These patients, Need us? Tom nodded. I'll stay too. My equipment modifications are essential for the treatment protocols. One by one, the other human staff members volunteered to remain at the colony. They had learned something important. Sometimes the most advanced medicine was the simplest medicine, applied by people who understood that saving lives was more important than following rules. Commander Stone looked at Jake with both admiration and concern. Dr. Morrison, you're asking people to risk their lives on a Class 12 Deathworld to continue medical treatments that the galactic medical establishment considers primitive. Jake smiled, thinking about all the impossible places he had worked, all the diseases he had fought with basic tools and stubborn determination. Commander, this is what humans do. We go to the places others won't go, and we do the jobs others can't do. That's what makes us Deathworlders. As news of the humans' decision spread through the galaxy, the Galactic Medical Council faced a crisis of their own. The primitive methods were working, but they challenged everything the Council believed about proper medical poo. Jake made his decision while watching Vextai help another crystalline being drink water from a simple glass cup. 2 weeks ago, she had been dying from the void plague. Now she was walking around the medical bay, her inner light bright and steady, helping other patients recover, using the same simple treatments that had saved her life. I'm staying, Jake announced to the evacuation committee. These patients need human medical supervision until they're completely cured. If I leave now, some of them will die. Commander Stone nodded grimly. I figured you'd say that. Captain Park has volunteered to stay with the New Horizons for transport support. Dr. Rodriguez and her team are staying too. What about the Galactic Medical Council? Jake asked. Are they going to let us continue using unauthorized medical procedures? That's where things get interesting, Stone replied, showing Jake a message on his communication device. They've received reports from 17 different star systems about diseases that their standard treatments can't cure. Word about your methods is spreading. Over the next month, Jake watched his small medical operation grow into something he had never expected. Ships began arriving at Kepler 442b carrying medical supplies and, more importantly, human doctors who wanted to learn what Jake was teaching. Dr. Carl Mason arrived first, a veteran from the Doctors Without Borders program who had spent 20 years treating diseases in Earth's most dangerous regions. He took one look at Jake's setup and grinned. This looks like Sudan in 2019, except with aliens. Where do I start? Nina became Jake's primary instructor, teaching incoming human doctors how to read the subtle signs that machines missed. She had developed her own techniques for observing alien physiology, combining Jake's intuitive approach with her knowledge of different species biology. The key is to forget everything you think you know about advanced medicine, Nina explained, to a group of newly arrived doctors. These patients don't need quantum nanotreatments. They need doctors who can think on their feet and adapt faster than the diseases they're fighting. Tom Casey's engineering modifications became the template for a new kind of medical equipment. Instead of fully automated systems that made decisions for doctors, his hybrid devices provided information that human doctors could use to make their own decisions. I call it assisted intuition, Tom explained to a team of alien engineers who had come to study his work. The machines do the measuring, but the humans do the thinking. The real breakthrough came when Jake successfully treated his 50th patient, a gas-based being whose species had never recovered from void plague infection before. Dr. Vexnali, who had initially criticized Jake's primitive methods, watched in amazement as her fellow gas being returned to full health, using nothing more than basic chemistry and careful observation. Dr. Morrison, she said, her colors shifting to deep blue with respect, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you my understanding. Will you teach me your methods? Jake spent the next week teaching Dr. Vexanali how to observe patients using senses that gas-based beings possessed, but had never applied to medicine. Her ability to detect chemical changes in the air around patients provided insights that even Jake's trained eyes could not gather. You're learning to combine your natural abilities with human medical thinking, Jake explained as they worked together on a complex case. That's more powerful than either approach alone. The collaboration between human and alien medical professionals created something entirely new. Alien doctors brought knowledge of physiology that humans had never encountered, while human doctors brought adaptive thinking and intuitive decision-making that alien medicine had never developed. Dr. Kexatai became particularly skilled at combining his forearm dexterity with human treatment protocols. He could simultaneously monitor multiple patients while making the rapid adjustments that Jake's methods required. "I have spent 47 years learning to rely on automated systems," he told Jake during one of their teaching sessions. "Learning to trust my own observations has been more difficult than any medical procedure I have ever mastered." Word of the colony's success reached the Galactic Medical Council, just as reports arrived from other systems where standard treatments had failed completely. The council faced a choice between maintaining their established medical protocols or embracing approaches that challenged everything they believed about proper medicine. Council leader Zethkar arrived at Kepler 442b 6 weeks after Jake's first successful treatment. His crystalline form reflected the orange light of the planet storms as he toured the medical facility that had become the galaxy's most unlikely success story. "Dr. Morrison," Zethkar said, observing Jake treat a patient using equipment that looked ancient compared to standard galactic medical technology, "your methods appear to violate every established principle of safe medical practice." "Council leader," Jake replied without stopping his work, "safe medical practice means saving lives. Everything else is just procedure." Zethkar watched Jake make split-second decisions based on observations that no scanner could quantify. The human doctor looked at a patient's posture, listened to breathing patterns, and even smelled the air around different species to determine how their treatments should be adjusted. "How do you know these decisions are correct?" Zethkar asked. "Experience," Jake replied, checking the pulse of an aquatic being whose biosuit had been rebuilt 3 times during treatment. "I've been making these kinds of decisions for 15 years in places where making the wrong choice meant people died. You learn to trust your training and your instincts." The formal evaluation took 3 days. Galactic medical experts examined Jake's patients, reviewed his treatment protocols, and tried to understand how such simple methods could succeed where advanced technology had failed. The results were undeniable. Jake's recovery rate was 97%. Compared to the 15% success rate of standard galactic treatments for void plague. More importantly, his patients stayed healthy after treatment, while patients treated with conventional methods often suffered relapses. "The evidence is conclusive," announced Dr. Thisara, the Council's chief medical evaluator. "Human medical approaches demonstrate effectiveness that exceeds our current capabilities. However, these methods require training and decision-making, skills that cannot be easily automated or standardized." Jake found himself appointed as the galaxy's first director of adaptive medical research, a position created specifically to develop training programs for what was now being called Deathworlder medicine. "The galaxy needs doctors who can think like humans," Zethkar explained during the appointment ceremony. "Your species has developed medical intuition that we never knew was possible." The medical training facility that grew up around Jake's original treatment center became the galaxy's first school for adaptive medicine. Human doctors taught alien medical professionals how to observe, adapt, and make decisions based on incomplete information, while alien doctors shared their knowledge of physiology that humans had never encountered. Nina was appointed as the first Director of Interspecies Medical Education. "We're not just teaching alien doctors to think like humans," she explained to a group of new students. "We're learning to combine the best of both approaches." Captain Park's transport service expanded into a fleet of ships carrying human medical teams to systems throughout the galaxy. Places where conventional medicine had failed now requested Deathworlder doctors who could succeed in impossible conditions. 6 months after his arrival on Kepler 442b, Jake stood in his new research facility, watching human and alien medical students work together on cases that would have been considered hopeless under the old system. The facility combined human intuition with alien technology, creating an approach to medicine that was more effective than either species could achieve alone. His communication device chimed with an emergency call from a distant system. Jake read, The message describing a new plague that was killing colonists faster than any known treatment could counter it. The local medical facilities were requesting immediate assistance from a Deathworlder medical team. Jake smiled as he picked up his basic medical kit, the same simple tools that had revolutionized galactic medicine. Dr. Mason and Nina were already preparing to join him along with a team of alien doctors who had learned to practice medicine the human way. Another impossible job? Nina asked as they headed toward Captain Park's ship. That's what we do, Jake replied, thinking about how far they had all come from that first desperate case on a hostile world. We go where others can't go, and we heal who others can't heal. As their ship lifted off from Kepler 442b, carrying a mixed team of human and alien medical professionals toward another crisis, Jake reflected on what they had accomplished. They had not just saved lives, they had changed how an entire galaxy thought about medicine. The universe was a dangerous place, full of diseases that could kill and worlds that could destroy. But now it also had doctors who had learned to heal in impossible places, using simple tools and complex thinking to save lives that advanced technology could not save. Earth had given the galaxy exactly what it needed. Not just survivors, but healers who refused to give up when the situation seemed hopeless. After all, there was always another impossible job that only a Deathworlder could manage.